whether you're a car enthusiast, maybe looking for some advice on how to maintain your vehicle, or even just one that appreciates a good travel story, this show is for you. We'll be covering everything from automotive repairs to electric vehicles and even your car's AC system. So get ready, buckle up, and join us on the ride. Our guest today is, well, he's really not just a sometimes guest anymore. He's beginning to be a regular, which I love that.
And that is comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. That's Taylor Bryant. He's an automotive instructor at Augusta Technical College. He writes articles for the Augusta Press, and he's been known to do some great YouTube videos. He'll be joining us today to answer some questions. Taylor, we're going to be ready?
Absolutely.
And plus you'll be telling us about a lot of neat things that you've been working with, all right?
Right. Had a lot of projects coming up, so definitely a lot to talk about.
Oh, that is great. I look forward to that. Okay, so we'll hear that and more. Give us a call. That number is 800-224-9090. That's 800-224-9090. You can also watch us live on Facebook and YouTube. And before we put this thing in gear, I want to say how thankful I am to all the men and women that have served and continue to serve in our military to preserve our freedom. And for those that gave all, we owe them a debt that we can never repay. And this is a great time for remembrance. So
Absolutely.
This show will be in honor of that also. I'm going to lay a tech tip quiz out there, and right after I lay the tech tip quiz out there, we'll talk to Taylor a little bit about the projects that he's got going on. And of course, the winner of the tech tip quiz will receive that unbelievable prize package that also includes a coffee mug, and it includes a shirt, a C&C Auto shirt, which is really, they look kind of neat. And you can only win that on the show. Okay, here we go. We're ready?
Let's do it.
All right, we're going to do it. Buck is a land surveyor. He owns a 2022 Ford F-350 that has been raised in order to get into some of the hard-to-reach areas that he goes into. He was by himself in the truck after a heavy rain, and he was way out in the woods. And even though he had a four-wheel drive, he got stuck. He got out, and then he was going to get out of the truck, and he slipped on the running board, and he broke his leg. His co-workers were over a mile away, and his phone had no reception. How did he let them know that he had broken his leg and needed help? The truck was stuck. The phone didn't work. His leg was broke. What was he going to do? If somebody knows the answer to today's Tech Tip quiz, give us a call, because we desperately need an answer to this one.
Yeah, I'm waiting to hear it.
Yeah, people want to know. Okay, Taylor, tell us a little bit about your projects that you have going on. I've been reading a little bit about them, and they sound exciting.
Yeah, I post everything I do on my Auto Scholar with Mr. B, either my YouTube or my Facebook. And
now, say that one more time so people know where to find your pages.
It's Auto Scholar with Mr. B, and I have a Facebook page, Twitter, and pretty much every social media. But most of the things I post are going to be on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And so I've been trying to get this gentleman to sell me his Chevy Volt, which is a hybrid. It's a series hybrid. For a few months, he finally put it on Marketplace, and I ended up buying this Chevy Volt. And it was not. It was completely dead when I got it. The high voltage battery was discharged. There was nothing. You know, you used the key, and there was nothing. You know, it was completely dead. And so I got it towed back to the shop. And it had been to 3 other shops, I think, and they could not fix it. It was deemed unfixable or not, worth being fixed. And we ended up fixing it in a couple of hours. And it was something pretty simple. It was the 12-volt battery. And it's important to remember that these high-voltage vehicles have 2 electrical systems. They have a high-voltage side, and then they have the 12-volt side that runs your radio, your windows, your headlights, everything else. And the problem with this car was the 12-volt system. And so I put a 12-volt AC Delco battery in it, because I always like to stick pretty much with the OEM parts on those type of cars. And it fired right up. and
Wow.
it's charging and everything. It's got some other problems too that I'm going to fix, but for the most part, charging, running, driving, and yeah, it was just something simple. So even though these cars are complex, they still have simple systems that can fail and look like more complex problems than they are.
So it sounds like it could be the forest and the trees deal.
Exactly. So, and that's why I try to teach all my students is really, if you've got an electrical problem, check your fuses first. 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a blown fuse or something like that. We tend, and especially as more advanced as we get, we tend to really think worst case scenario, okay, it's a high voltage battery or it's a, CAN bus problem or whatever. And it could be just a very simple repair, a simple fix that can be overlooked by anybody. But I tell all my students, you're here to fix cars, and if you don't, somebody will.
That's what I push on the show. Just about every time somebody calls up and has an electrical issue, I tell them that the way I like to do it, start with the cheapest, easiest thing first, checking
Absolutely. And there's 4 things you should check with any electrical problem that exist in the world. I don't care what it is. You've got power, ground, load, and conductor, as long as it's a direct circuit. So if your electrical problem has at least one of, now it could be all of them, but it has at least one of those things. And how we teach at Augusta Tech is I teach you how to check those 4 things. And if you know how to check those 4 things and you know what you're looking for, you can fix any electrical problem out there. There's nothing too difficult for you.
Fantastic. Well, I love staying up to date with
Absolutely.
your issues, and I hope to hear more during the show. Tell us
Yes.
about some other things that
Yes,
you have
we've got a bunch
on.
going on.
Yeah, and urge everyone to tune into his videos. Also, he's got some great stuff there. Okay, we have mentioned we're talking a little bit about air conditioning type items also during the show today. So with that, one of the things that I think some people think is that when they have their AC on like their temperature down to like 70 or 72 or maybe even just their defroster on and not even running the AC, that they think that if their AC compressor is low in refrigerant, they're not doing any damage because they're not running the air conditioning right now because they're not feeling the semi-cold air that they would have like they would have if they had low refrigerant. Well, in reality, the compressor on most modern vehicles runs almost all the time.
Right.
If that knob is not completely in the off position, it is more than likely running the compressor, and all it's doing is mixing heated air with cooler air,
Right.
so that you can get the desired temperature that you're looking for. And what happens if a vehicle does not have the right amount of refrigerant in it and it's not getting as cold as it should, that refrigerant is what carries the lubricant that lubricates the inside of that compressor. And so that is if you're running low in refrigerant, that's very much like running your engine low in oil. It's
Right.
going to do damage.
Absolutely.
And so many times people think, well, I cut my AC on in the springtime and now it's making a rattle or noise, or it locked up and it just did it the time I cut it on. Well, it didn't do it just now. It was doing that back in the winter when you were running it and didn't know you were running it.
Right.
So keeping an AC fully charged at all times is a good idea. Fortunate, they don't run as often. They don't seem to develop leaks near as bad as they did years back.
Right. There's some better materials out there. The seals, the Teflon coated seals, and everything that we have now for these AC systems really seem to be doing. You're always going to have some natural leakage because the molecules of 134A and 1234YF are so small. And,
It's like a tire permeation, because and a lot of people wonder why a house can have like a home AC unit. You can have the refrigerant and it can stay in there for years and years and years. Well, you have very little rubber items. Hey, we'll talk about this more. We'll be right back after these messages. And we are talking about projects that he's been working on. Also, we're talking about AC systems. And we were talking a little bit about why a automotive AC tends to have more leaks than a home AC. And of course, one of the things I mentioned is that an automotive system has to have a way for it has to have rubber hoses in order for the engine to be able to go up and down, because the compressor is traditionally mounted to the engine. And because of that's on an ICE engine,
Right. It's a little different.
but we want to talk about that a little while later too. But because of that, with rubber hoses, it's much like a tire. You're going to lose a little bit through permeation, but also a car's got something that a home don't have either. A home don't vibrate hitting potholes and
Right.
bumps and
Right.
curbs and all this, and it don't get up to it don't get up to near the temperatures that it would get under the hood of a vehicle. So there's a lot of things happening in an automotive system that's not really happening in a home system, and not to mention, it's very seldom that in the home AC or commercial that size or weight is a big issue. But of course, the American public want certain design cars.
Right.
And they want every component to fit into what
Absolutely.
their design needs to be. And so, of course, they're constantly making compressors and AC systems smaller. And then, of course, also working with something that also the commercial and residential AC people run into. And that's how much the refrigerant is going to affect the atmosphere if it leaks out, whatever type refrigerant. So they constantly change, not constantly, but there's been changes over the years in the type of refrigerant that's used. So there's a lot of things different in the automotive field, AC units that have to do with vehicles, than the home heating and air systems. Both have changed in technology a huge amount
Very much.
over the years.
And one of the things also that we don't have to deal with home-wise versus car-wise is fuel economy. Mm-hmm. And AC is one of the big zaps of fuel economy. So this is why we're seeing, and in the EV world, it's range. So now with the EVs, we're starting to use heat pumps instead of just standard compressors. And you're starting to see variable displacement compressors on more ICE engines and things like that, just to increase that fuel economy just a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And all this comes at a cost. Yep. Because the parts are way more expensive for these types of systems. So your AC repair, as we move through the technology, is going to become more expensive.
Yes. Car manufacturers will spend millions and millions of dollars to make it just an ounce lighter.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yep.
You know, let's go to the calls.
Let's do it.
Let's go. Here we go. We will go over to Randy. And Randy, welcome to the C&C Auto Show. What can we help you with?
Good morning. I got a 2000, or my wife has a 2018 GMC Acadia, and sometimes I notice that the tach is reading 0. It doesn't indicate, and that's the only problem I've had with it. But the other day we took a trip and we drove, like a couple hours without stopping, and the engine service light came on. And whenever I noticed the light, I looked at the tach, and the tach was 0. And I was wondering, do you think that the engine service light finally came on because the tach went so long at reading 0?
Well, the tach is probably going to be getting its signal from the crankshaft position sensor, which is mounted probably somewhere on your block, either that or your bell housing. I'm not sure on this car. I would be going somewhere and trying to find out what that code is saying. And if you have a code for a crankshaft position sensor, especially, you mentioned one thing that's kind of important in this situation is the time. And when we see these fail, a lot of times they'll fail when the engine's hot. It's almost like the old the ignition module failures that we had back in the 90s, where when they got hot, they would fail. And then by the time the tow truck got there to get your car would crank back up because it cooled off enough to make that electronic device work again. To properly diagnose this, you would need somebody with an oscilloscope to go in there and actually read the signal from that. And kind of that will differentiate if you're having a problem with your instrument cluster, which houses the tachometer, which we've seen that with GM for years, or if you actually have a crankshaft position sensor that is failing. A lot of times with crankshaft position sensor failing, your car will shut off. You'll have misfires, things like that, because the crankshaft doesn't know where in the firing order it is. And sometimes the camshaft position sensor will report that back to the ECM and the car will still run. It just depends on what type of system you have. So without knowing what the code is, you would just be guessing at this point if the crankshaft position sensor is bad, or maybe the ECM has a problem, or you have wiring to that crankshaft position sensor that has somehow, been compromised in getting that signal back. It should be a 3-wire sensor somewhere on there, and you'll have a 5-volt signal going in, a ground, and then you'll have a signal coming out reporting back what the crankshaft position sensor is saying to the ECM. So,
and you can start out if you wanted to. There's a lot of places will check and just give you the code that is at no charge. For instance, we do that. If somebody comes in and says, my light's on, what code is stored, we'll plug in, let you know the code. Now, that won't give you any kind of diagnostic reading. You have to be real careful, though. Sometimes people will go by and it'll just be reading a code. And let's say that a code says something like crankshaft sensor, and they'll go ahead and just put one on. Yep. You stand a chance on wasting money doing that, unless it's something, just a very simple code. Then I would hold short of just going out and buying parts just because of code. But sometimes it's interested to know what code is stored in there if you want to do it at no charge. Many times you're able to do that. But it sounds like more than likely you're going to need a regular diagnostic test to find out, and someone to follow the chart.
Right.
To find out what that code is, and high probability they're going to be tied together. And all the things that Taylor mentioned is the route to go.
Right.
Now, the TAC has been doing that for, maybe a year, and there's been no engine running problems. Mm-hmm. Do you think if it was the crank position sensor that wouldn't you see some other things by now?
Let me put you on hold just a second, and we're going to pull over, but we'll come back on, and we will answer that question. Be right back. Augusta Technical College instructor and also YouTube video maker for issues having to do with cars. And we were talking with Randy, and Randy has a 2018 Acadia. It's got 60,000 miles. Tachometer wasn't working for a period of time. Well, I take that back. The tachometer has been not working for a period of time back, and now the check engine light comes on. Is that correct, Randy?
Well, 95% of the time the TAC does work.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes we notice that it'll just be reading 0. But,
okay.
The engine service lights never come on before, but after that long trip, it came on. Mm-hmm. But now the light's back out again, and the TAC's working again,
Okay. We ran this past our extensive group of technical advisors here, which amounts to me and Taylor. So
a lot of experience.
We discussed your issue during the time that we had off there. And what we come up with is there is a chance that check engine light, it might not be related since it had been, your TAC had been acting up many times before, but it just come on a trip. Now, it may have only come on because it went through the drive cycles without getting the correct reading enough to set the light. It's all going to start with checking that code. And I believe I would consider going by somewhere that checks codes at no charge, which, again, we do that. There's a lot of places do it. And plug in and say, what's the code? You might have something completely unrelated to anything to do with the tachometer and all that going in there. You may have an evap code. Yours might have to do with even a loose gas cap can do that. Now, be careful not to go in and somebody says, yes, you have an evap code, so you got to buy a new gas cap.
Right.
Because usually it's not the gas cap itself. It was usually loose or something like that. Now, if it reads something like an oxygen sensor or a sensor of some kind, then I would go ahead and have the other diagnostic test run, find out if it ties in with the TAC. If it don't, the tach's not bothering you, it's not essential that the tach work all the time. It may be a cluster reading. You may be getting a faulty reading inside there. But you at least need to know what that code is. And then that way you'll know whether it's something that you should pursue or just say, well, I'm going to tighten the gas cap and drive it again and see how it does. Sound good?
Yeah, quickly, talking about the gas cap, that model doesn't have the screw-on gas cap. Can that still cause a problem, that little flapper?
Can, but likely. Would you agree with that, Taylor?
Yeah,
Unlikely.
most likely not. Most evap problems we see are either with the
Okay.
purge valve or a vent valve, or a vacuum leak itself go into one of those two items. But anything goes now. The car's old enough now to where it can be anything.
Yeah. You could have a purge
Right.
valve,
All right.
or you might not even have an evap code
Right.
in there.
And it's
and a
Yeah, I
car
understand.
can have a glitch every now and then. If you got a non-essential code, let's say that it stored the code one time and it hadn't come back on for like a large number of drive cycles, you might say, well, I'm going to just continue to drive it because it won't cause the car to break down anyway. See if it returns, and if it does, then do the diagnostic.
Right.
But everything will stem on what that code is. That's the beginning of
Gotcha.
it.
All right, guys. Appreciate it.
Oh, we
Absolutely.
thank you. We appreciate
Thanks,
the
Randy.
call. Okay, the number to call is 800-224-9090. And I think it would be a great idea to go over to the caller who has a 2011 Subaru. Good morning and welcome to the C&C Auto Show. What can we help with?
Good morning, both of you. Just a quick question. I've got close to 200,000 on my Subaru now, and I noticed every now and then my dash would light up like a Christmas tree, and I could move the cable a little bit on the battery, and I could mess with it a certain way, and it'd go off, and it'd stay off for about a month, and it would come back on. So I changed the terminals, even bought another battery just to see if that would happen. And the car's running great, but every now and then, like even right now, I'm thinking about listening to you guys. It's lit up, ABS, the doors, the slip differential, all the little lights that come on, light it up. And I'm trying to figure out why, is it doing that? What would you start with, or what do you think it could be? And like I said, it still runs great, everything, but it'll light up. Used to, I could move it around with the cable a little bit. And I'm thinking, do you think it's a bad cable, or what do you think?
Well, electrical problems are hard enough to diagnose in person, but this one's over the radio is going to be tough. So I have seen some issues with Subarus, their ignition switches. Well, when you turn the key on, all your lights come on and things like that. And, with that, are the lights coming on because you have code setting, or are they coming on because they're of an electrical problem or something like that is really what I would need to know. Sometimes if we do have ignition switch problems, we do a wiggle test, and we just kind of wiggle the key in there. Is this a vehicle that has a key, or is it a keyless?
Yeah. No, it has a key.
Okay. Sometimes most ignition switches are plastic, and they have a little, over time, and definitely this car's 13 years old, has 200,000 miles on it. It's been started up a million times probably. So those parts can wear out, right, and can possibly cause some voltage issues in there as well. But if that's not changing anything, a full vehicle code scan and just kind of trying to figure out where the codes are coming from.
I'm thinking that if you want to be sure if the cable's right or wrong now, a technician would probably need to do this, but they can run a voltage drop test on that cable between the post of the battery and the end of the cable, and they can tell if it's dropping any voltage at all on that cable. And if it is, then, of course, the cable either needs to be repaired or replaced, one of the two. Now, of course, I kind of halfway wondered if the post in the battery, how old is the battery itself?
Well, I just bought, I thought maybe that possibly that could be that. I bought a battery probably about 6 months ago.
Okay.
And what keeps throwing me off is that one time before all this went bad, I could kind of move the cable around the post, and every now and then I could hear everything cut off, and I'd look back and I go, oh, everything's off, and I would drive it for like a month or two. I mean, not any kind of light at all was on my dash. And then all of a sudden I can get in and crank it up, and it lights up like a Christmas tree inside. Everything still does what it's supposed to do, but it lights up. Like even my brake light, emergency brake light, would come on and blink and all that kind of stuff. But this time it's staying on and it's not coming off.
I'm going to tell
Even though
you
I'm
something
moving
I'm
cable
doing
around.
right now. This is kind of fun. I bought that Jurassic Park vehicle, that 94 Explorer.
that thing's
I got
great.
it parked out there. I got new decals ordered for it and all that. We've been repairing the AC and doing these other things. The battery goes dead on it every now and then. Not all the time. It'll sit there for 2 or 3 days. Battery's
Parasitic
good.
draw.
Then all of a sudden, movement will be dead. I've got it parked out there now, and I've got the charger on a 10-amp charge. And after the show today, I'm going to take our little temperature reading gun, and it's more of a, what is it, infrared
camera.
So I can take a picture of and move it all around the relays, and if there's a relay stuck on, it'll be bright red in the picture, and the other ones will be lighter colored. So I'm going to be looking, because if you're losing voltage, you're losing heat. You're producing some heat. I'm just kind of playing around with you on that part. But it sounds, my thought is you need a voltage drop test run on that cable. If you can wiggle it and you hear things making noise, something's wrong.
Yep.
Right. Okay. That's what I'm thinking. Okay. I have a feeling it is something to do with that cable, just because for so long it would let me do that. I'd get under there and have to loosen it up, and I'd move it around and tighten it up, and everything would cut off. And now it's got where, it's getting harder and harder to do that, to get it to work like that.
Yeah. You got to be able to wiggle that cable and nothing click or nothing go wrong. It's got to have a good tight connection right there. So that's going to be the first step. Okay?
Okay.
Hey, we appreciate the call.
Your help.
Oh, thank you. Okay,
Thanks.
we'll be right back after this. The show, I'm Aaron Clements here with co-host Taylor Bryant, and we're back on the road ready to answer your automotive questions. And we will go over to Ron in Augusta. Ron, welcome to the C&C Auto Show, and what could we help you with today?
Thank you. On my 2003 Dodge Ram 2500 Cummins, I bought this truck brand new. It'll be 20 years old for me next month. For about the last 12 or 15 years, during driving, during the heat of the summer, and having the AC up fairly high, all of a sudden the AC clutch will quit turning. And I'll stop, and I've got a handful of relays and put another relay in it, and it'll be fine for several months. And one other situation on that is never blown a fuse or nothing, but one other situation, the windshield wiper at one time, it would quit in an up position. So got to fiddling around with the windshield wiper park relay and started pulling it up a little bit instead of pushing it all the way in, and then it works fine, and it does fine now. I'm kind of wondering if under that panel where the female connector is for the relays, could it be separating when you push the relay all the way down? And could that be the problem maybe with the AC clutch relay?
I would say that is completely possible. Even a slight loose connection there can cause it to build up excessive heat, and over time make the relay much hotter than it should be. The other thing that's a possibility, though,
it is hot when I go to pull it out.
Okay, that's probably the issue then, that wire going to the relay. Now, I don't know if you would do that on that model, but there's some cars now because of when certain wires go bad inside a power distribution box like that, people used to have to replace the whole unit. Now there's actually procedures that people do that will bypass that and take that one wire out of there, the wires that go to that relay, and separate the relay from the box. Now, the other thing I was going to mention, if you felt heat, this is probably not the problem. It's probably the connection. But a diode on the clutch being bad can send a voltage spike back to that relay. So there's ways to test a diode with a meter. A technician can go in and check and see if the diode's good or bad. But with when you mentioned it felt pretty hot, I lean a little bit more toward the connector connection at that. And in some cases, you can even tighten them up a little bit. Taylor, what do you think?
I've got a different take on this.
Okay, here we go.
And only because I've seen this a few times. I think you have maybe a short in the clutch coil. And the clutch coil itself is a coil of wire. It works just like a solenoid. And it provides a magnetic field that pulls that clutch winding, inside the plate on the front of the clutch.
Right.
And if you have a short there, you can be pulling too much amperage, and it could be just enough to where, if you look at Ohm's law, if amperage goes up, resistance has to go down. So if that short, there goes all your resistance, your amperage is going to go up, and it may go up just for a couple of seconds and burn that relay out or get it too hot to function.
Initially cuts on.
Right. That pull could possibly be, causing that relay to overheat and damage
So a
the relay.
technician could check the resistance of that
Exactly.
clutch winding and check the diode at the same time, but
Right.
yours is a lot more. You run into that more than you do the diode, so that's a great suggestion.
Right. So, yeah, and my first step as a technician would be checking the resistance of the clutch coil, and it should have, I'm not sure, I know the ones 6 to 10 ohms or something like that of resistance, but I'm not sure what there should be a specification somewhere that tells you. And on that, you can get the clutch a lot of times cheaper than the compressor. But with the age of the truck, if you've never had a compressor, I would replace both at that point.
They come together, and
Right.
it's a much neater job, too.
Absolutely.
And, Ron, what you got to decide is which way that you would rather go. Continue to keep a handful of relays or have the resistance checked in your...
Well, and eventually the coil will fail.
Yeah, eventually.
And it'll probably smoke.
Yeah, those 3 months ago to 1 month, and then 1 month ago to a week, and then...
Yeah.
You're going to have a whole truck bed full of relays back there.
Right.
Yeah. So on the electrical system of that, to me, it seems like it would blow a fuse before it would a relay.
And
Don't
it could at times.
It's never blown any fuse.
Right. I would still. I mean, checking resistance is free. Before I start throwing parts at things, I have seen fuses hold up to much higher amperage than they're rated to as well. It just very depends on certain things, and that should be that clutch. The fuse for the clutch should be a 20 or a 30 amp fuse, I would think. And of course, you have a relay because you don't want that running through your AC button in your car. But, checking, putting an amperage meter, amp clamp on that circuit just to see how much amperage that clutch is pulling.
Oh,
and
okay.
then you
That
can kind of
makes
tell,
sense.
what resistance you should be expecting. So if you have a 12-volt system,
Okay.
if it's pulling 2 amps, you would know that would be about 6 ohms of resistance you'd be expecting. So.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Hey, we appreciate the call. And the number to call is 800-224-9090. If you got a question about your car, truck, your SUV,
you give us a call, and we will be ready to answer that question.
We're talking about AC systems also.
So, and that was a great question.
Yeah, that was really good.
For that.
AC clutch is definitely a big part of the system, on making the system work. One thing I want to make sure we mention a little bit about is cabin air filters.
So many times people don't think of that as being part of the AC AC system. But it's really it's kind of remarkable that they didn't use cabin air filters earlier than they did.
Right.
I mean, it's just something that seems like it was should be a quick idea that should be quickly used. Use them. It works very much the same way as you would have a filter in your home central heating and air system. It filters the air before it comes into the house, and in this case, filters the air before it comes into the cabin. And I have seen some nasty ones over the years. Yeah.
People forget about those filters all the time. And I tell people, especially down here, if you live in an area that has a lot of dust, a lot of pollen, you live on a dirt road, you have pets in your car, anything like that, definitely want to change your cabin air filter. At least check it every 20,000 miles or 2 years.
That's a
or
good
so.
rule of thumb. I
Right.
think a lot of owner manuals tell you sooner than that, but in this area, I found it to be somewhere between 15 and 20,000
Right.
miles myself. Also, checking it, it's not always stopped up. Some you can check pretty easy. Some's more involved. So
Right.
if it's a harder one to take in and out, then I recommend just replacing it. Oh man, we gotta pull over. That's all for this episode. But there'll be more to come very shortly. So I sure enjoyed being here, and we are going to be ready for another part of the C&C Auto Show shortly. I want to say thank you to Mason Rogers in there. He's punching all the buttons.
Absolutely.
Capping.
We appreciate
that.
And we'll
be back with more of the C&C Auto Show very shortly. Whether you're a car enthusiast, maybe looking for some advice on how to maintain your vehicle, or just someone that appreciates a good travel story, this show is for you. We'll be covering everything from automotive repairs to electric vehicles. And Taylor's here for that. Taylor, are we ready?
Absolutely. Let's get it going.
Yeah, we had some great questions during the last hour and a lot of fun. Hopefully we gave away some good information having to do with air conditioning systems and also some other vehicles that people called about. Again, we'll be talking a little bit about AC systems. And Taylor even filled us in on his on a project that he's had going on with the EV. And Taylor, you mentioned that you are now driving your Chevy Volt.
Right, yeah. Turned it around, got it back running, and I've been driving it just on campus right now because I don't want to get too far away because that's a tow bill if it breaks down.
Yeah.
So I've just been keeping it on campus, just doing some testing, and I have to do a couple of things to it. I have to rebuild the instrument cluster. The LCD screen in it has failed, so I've ordered another one, and I'm going to go into there and fix that because Chevrolet wants about $1,100 for one, and I don't want to pay that much. So that's
so
more
you
than I
plan
paid for the car. So
finding a way to repair it then.
Right. And a lot of these systems can be repaired. I just got a control module from a Jaguar the other day, repaired from a company called Upfix. That's and they were very reasonable on their repair prices, and it worked out fine. So some of the stuff can be fixed.
Well, and mention to us one more time the YouTube, where they go to watch your YouTube videos.
Absolutely. Just go to YouTube and find Auto Scholar with Mr. B. I'm in there, and I've got a lot of lessons and a lot of how-to videos, and all the way from fundamentals of how to change light bulbs all the way to timing chains and electrical diagnosis and things like that.
Fantastic. Okay, we got a tech tip quiz that we had laid out during the first hour. We did not get an answer to, so we're going to have to recycle this tech tip quiz and put it back on the table. Here it is. Buck is a land surveyor. He owns a 2022 Ford F-350. It's been raised up in order to get to some of the hard-to-reach areas that he has to go in to survey. It goes in some land. He was way back in the woods by himself in the truck, and it had rained very heavily just before then. Well, he got stuck. And then when he was getting out the truck to try to figure out why he was stuck or what he could do to get unstuck, he slipped on the running board. Then he broke his leg. He was sitting out there in the middle of the woods
It's a bad
with
day.
a broke leg, stuck car. And so he said, well, I'll call for help. They're only a mile or two down the road, or they're somewhere in this area, so I'll call my coworkers. Phone didn't have any reception. So, boom, he didn't know what in the world to do. So he thought about something, and he made it work. What did he do? How did he let his coworkers know that he had a broken leg and needed help? If someone knows the answer to that, they can give us a call. And again, the number is 800-224-9090. And if you have a question about your car, your truck, your SUV, you give us a call also at the same number, 800-224-9090. We are talking a lot about things to do with the AC system, preparing your car for the summertime. One of the things we talked about during the last hour is how important it is to keep your AC system serviced. If it gets even a little bit low in refrigerant, then it could do damage to the compressor.
Right.
And we talked about that even when everything's perfect, it's going to lose a little bit.
Right.
So if you have a car that's 2 or 3 years old and has never, 2, 3, 4 in that range, if it's not as cold as it used to be, high probability you are some low in refrigerant.
Right.
It used to be you could just add a little bit refrigerant to a system, but now there's really no other method than removing what's in there and then putting a vacuum on the system for a period of time and putting new refrigerant back in.
Right.
And then, of course, during that time, we recommend cleaning the condenser, and we'll talk about that shortly. But for right now, let's go over to Burton.
From.
Welcome to the C&C Auto Show, and what can we help you with?
Yes, I'm Bert from up in Saluda, and I have a 2016 Ford Transit, and recently my dealer switched out the alternator and water pump. And after I got the vehicle home, a couple of days later, I tried to crank it up, and the battery was dead. So they went and towed it in, put a new battery in, brought it back home, and a couple more days later, I cranked it up and it wouldn't crank. Took it back to the dealer, and they said the battery had to be swapped out, so they swapped the battery out. It was still under warranty. And now it's back at the dealer because it won't crank, and they can't find what's wrong. They took the radio out. They thought it was a radio, and they still are puzzled about what's going on. Why is it running the battery dead?
Parasitic draw.
Yep, that's sure what it sounds like. You got something pulling off of that battery. I will tell you what I do, and I'm sure Taylor's got some tricks that he uses also, but I like to slip up on a parasitic draw. I slip up on them, and by slipping up, I park the vehicle, and then in some cases I wait until it's dark. And when it gets dark outside, if there's anything that is producing a light, for instance, if there happens to be a dome light stuck somewhere, or a glove box light, or a thing, I walk over to the car and I look around through the windows at things like that, and then I can see that. Then I take that same infrared gun that I'm talking about, and I kind of point it at different things,
Right.
To find out if there's anything that may be pulling heat. Now, after that, the next step, you come into running an amp meter, an amp draw. I think, what is it? Preferable, the recommended, it shouldn't be over 50 milliamps, I believe. Is
On the newer cars, it can be a little bit higher.
A little higher because of
your
so
CAN
much
bus
more
and stuff
memory.
is running in the background.
But somewhere in that range, 50, 70 milliamps, if it's over that, something is pulling that voltage out of that battery. And then the next step is to go through the process of pulling fuses until you find out what circuit,
fuses and
looking
relays.
at wiring diagrams. Is anything you want to add into that part, Taylor?
That's pretty much, if you've got a system, you can also do this with a scan tool. Of course, the scan tool is going to pull some amperage as well, but you can go to the data interface control module, and you can look and see and make sure that all your modules are going offline after a certain amount of time. So I normally give it about 30 minutes.
That's a good thought too.
Yeah, and if a module is staying awake, it's because something on that circuit is making it stay awake. So if you have electronics control module, that can be a lot of things. But if you have an ABS module, a lot of times the ABS pump will get hung up or something like that and cause an issue. We've seen a lot of ABS modules lately causing parasitic draw. That doesn't mean it's causing that in your situation. And I've seen a lot of situations where parasitic draw, on one car is completely different from the other. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely one of those case-by-case things.
Now, that's a good point there. Burton, one thing that we include in our basic diagnostics, like Taylor was mentioning a little earlier, where he found something basic on a car that had already been to 3 shops. He found something basic. I like to start with that basics, and that basic, of course, is when I look at them and check it, preferably at night. So you can't always do that, but I try to walk around the car and look for anything that might be sticking in the on position. But then after that, it can get you move into more complicated, like possibly looking at an infrared gun. That's a very basic step too. But after that, you move into the steps like Taylor. But start with that easy stuff first, that easy, cheap stuff. And don't assume that just because 2 people or 3 people or 4 people or 5 people has looked at the car, that it's not something simple. It's going to have to be hard.
Start from scratch every time, because I never trust anybody else's data. Well, we've replaced this, and this, and that. Well, I'm still going to check those parts, you know.
Oh, and something else I've done before. I've had case down with it doing this before. I've had cases to where I'd let the car sit for about an hour and then walk over and touch the alternator, and the alternator be hot. Mm-hmm. And say, well, the rest of the engine's cold. Why is the alternator hot?
Regulators hung up. Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to go through those basic tests, but you do have a draw, and those are the steps to go through on finding it.
Did you have the draw before the alternator replacement?
Well, being you just said this, some mornings it would hesitate to crank up, and it has been doing that probably since I've had it.
Okay.
And that's been probably about a year or two.
Well, and another thing I want to mention is this, because it's a transit, it's a commercial vehicle, you may have aftermarket equipment somewhere in this vehicle that's pulling, something that it's not supposed to. I'm not sure what your situation is. Is this vehicle outfitted with any type of equipment on it?
Not that I know of. Okay. It is commercial. It's passenger in the front and it's cargo in the back.
Well, I'll tell you the question I asked to find out if they know, if they've been looking at it. Say, what is the amp draw? How much does it have? If they say 0, that's wrong, because it's got to have something.
It's got to have something, yeah.
So, but if they say, it's only got 30 milliamps, then you know that they did check it. But if they say something, it's got 200, 300 milliamps, then you got a problem. And then they just need to trace it down to find out which one, what that is coming from. Okay?
Well, they're ready to throw in the towel on it. Let
me put you on hold just a second. I'm going to be right back.
They had replaced the alternator and the water pump in it, mm-hmm. and got it back home, and it wouldn't crank. Hold it back in the shop. They put a new battery in because the battery was under warranty. Got it home. 2 days later, the car wouldn't crank. Took it back to the shop. They have not been able to pinpoint what was wrong with it. They took the radio out, still nothing, and they're ready to throw the towel in.
Okay. Well, I would find a shop that would run an amp draw test if the other shop's ready to throw the towel in, because you have to know what the amp draw is. And if it's pulling a battery down overnight, it's got to be in excess of what's recommended, which is going to be somewhere between 50 and 100 milliamps is recommended. If it's over that, it's going to pull it down depending on how much. And how much it's pulling kind of gives you an idea of where the problem is. If it's pulling like 200 milliamps, and you may have a module somewhere that's sticking and pulling extra voltage. If it's pulling like 500, 600, you either got a light or an item like an alternator or something larger pulling out of there. If it's not showing one at all, then it's one that you're going to have to do, like I was talking about, slipping up. And what I've did as far as that goes, you may have a switch, kind of like what Taylor talked about, that may only activate under a certain temperature. For instance, we used to run from time to time a horn. Somebody would say, hey, every morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, my horn goes off, wakes all my neighbors up, and they get mad. Well, the horn contacts can be very close together, and then when the temperature drops, they get close enough together to touch and set the horn off. Right. And so you could have something like that, but you're just going to need someone who's willing to take the time to run those tests and go through the items on there to find that. And a good, there's no question technicians are out there that can find that problem.
Is C&C Automotive close to Saluda?
Yeah, we have a store. We have a couple of stores in Aiken. Yeah, we have one on Warrenville Highway and one over in East Pine Log Road. Yeah, so we have 2 in Aiken.
And y'all offer those services there?
Yes. Now we offer towing. Mm-hmm. We have towing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, we thank you.
Thanks
we sure
for calling.
do appreciate the call, and good luck.
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, the number to call is 800-224-9090. I want to mention that it's car show season, and a lot of people's pulling out their weekend rides and toys and finding that their battery's dead. Mm-hmm. And just many of the new many of them just buy a new battery every year. They don't want to go through the trouble of trying to come up with any solution. They just, the battery discharged and it's set. And when a discharged battery sets for any length of time, it goes bad. So they just got to go buy a new one. Well, the answer to that is an AGM battery made by Clarios there, and a good battery maintainer. If you use those two, your problems will go away. The AGM battery holds up under that stressful weather. It withstands the vibrations a lot better. That's why I have one on my dirt bike, because goodness, it gets a lot of vibration, and it's just it will last a lot longer than any of the acid filled type batteries. Right. So don't buy a new battery every year for your toys. Go get an AGM battery and a maintainer, and your problems will go away. And you'll be, when you walk out there, even after it's been sitting, you'll be able to jump on it and ride.
It makes solar maintainers now too.
Oh,
you don't even have to plug them in. You just put them on the dash, and they'll keep that charge up when it's sunny outside.
Fantastic. Well, get something to keep that charge up, because that is so frustrating to want to use your toy. You waited all winter to be able to get on it, and then boom, battery's dead. You ready to go to calls?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Let's go over to, let's see here. I think we got Terry here. Hello, Terry. Welcome to the C&C Auto Show. And I did something terrible here that Mason Rogers is going to be throwing stuff at me, flashing lights at me, doing all kind of other stuff if I don't go ahead and take this quick break. So I'm going to put you on hold, and as soon as we return, I'm going to come right back to you, and we'll be right back after these messages. You give us a call. We always have a great time talking during the breaks, and we're talking about cars and all kind of other things going on there. Now, just before we had to pull over just a second ago, we had Terry on the line with us. Was that Terry? Let's see here. Yeah, I think so. But on the line with us, and we had to pull over. Welcome back to the C&C Auto Show. What can we help you with?
Well, good morning, Aaron. It's Terry O'Loughlin up in Erie, PA. I think I'd like to take a crack at the question, your tech question, the guy that's stuck out in the woods with a broken leg.
Oh, wow. You know I'm going to need to put you on the stage here, so be still. And the question was, Buck is a land surveyor. He owns a 2022 Ford F-350, and it's been raised up in order to get into some of those hard-to-reach areas. He was by himself in the truck after a heavy rain, and he got stuck. And then he got out of the truck to try to get unstuck, and he slipped on the running board, broke his leg. Then he was going to call his friends to come help. His phone had no reception. He was in a mess. I mean, a big mess. But he had an idea. So what did he do to be able to let his friends know that he had broken his leg and gotten stuck? And what is the answer to today's Tech Tip quiz?
Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. There are ways that you can still use your phone. I'm assuming he has the phone. It doesn't have a signal. If you shut the phone off, shut it down completely, and then turn it back on, and instead of typing in your code to unlock the phone, you type in 911. It will usually switch to a different channel in the area that has a stronger signal. So there's still opportunity with the phone that even if he couldn't get back in the truck, that he could still make at least a 911 call. Secondarily, you can still send SMS even when it's showing no signal on the phone. So those are my two best guesses. If he could get back in the truck, he could do Morse code on the horn. But I'm going to stay with the cell phone, I think, and see if that works.
Wow, now you got some pretty exciting answers there.
Yeah,
I got to admit, now
The creative.
The Morse code with the horn,
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then the 911. Now here's the tricky part. He didn't know about the 911. He had no idea that might work. Now the only thing is, all he knew was that his cell phone had no reception on it. So he was kind of stuck there. So I had to do that part. The part on the horn, they were at least a mile or more away, so they wasn't able to hear the horn. But that, I gotta admit, that was good. I like that. That would make a different Tech Tip quiz, but I had to do it on that one. And so the part that leaves us what? There was one other one that you had mentioned.
Text message.
Yeah, the text message.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it wouldn't. He couldn't get it. The
will still
text
go through.
message in the truck.
Okay.
He was holding his phone and trying, and it just would not. It said did not send or do not send, and he kept trying and trying. It wouldn't. So, but I'm gonna tell you, if anybody deserves an honorable mention, that would be you on that one, because that was good.
Well, that's the best I got on it. So.
Well, you did really good. You're going to love the answer to this one, though. Hey, I appreciate the call.
Oh, boy. Okay, Aaron. Have a good one, you guys.
Thank you very
Thank you for
much,
calling.
Terry. Great.
Yep.
Okay, the number to call, 800-224-9090. If you have a question about your car, your truck, your SUV, or any other item that you might drive, you give us a call, and we will be glad to answer that. We'll go over to the next caller, and welcome to the C&C Auto Show. What can we help you with?
I think I got an answer for your tech tip quiz, Aaron.
Be still. Don't move.
Okay.
Okay, you are on stage, and the question was, Buck's a land surveyor. He got stuck in the woods, way out there, got out, broke his leg. His cell phone wouldn't work. How did he let his friends know that he was in trouble? What's the answer?
Well, he was one of these surveyors that uses a drone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he used his drone to fly up and notify his friends weren't that far away that he was in trouble. It had a speaker and a microphone on it.
Well, now he was not able to fly a drone to where his friends was, because he was not that good at being able to go in and fly in to see where they were parked at, because they were parked in places that was also to where you really couldn't hardly get anything to land in there. There was trees all around. But I will say you are getting very warm.
Oh.
You are, matter of fact, you almost smoking hot. So what is the answer?
So it wasn't a drone then, you're saying?
Well, that is possible. Oh, you're so close. So close. Don't make me do it. Don't do it. Don't. Oh, no.
I'll have to try another time.
Yes, you will. But you did good. You're going to help somebody else, no doubt in my mind. Appreciate the call. Okay, the number to call, 800-224-9090. If you got a question about your car, your truck, or your SUV, you give us a call, and we will go over to Jim. Jim has a F-250. What's it doing to you, Jim? Oh, hold on. Jim.
Yeah, I bought the F-250 used 6 months ago with a 5.4 gas motor. Never owned one before like that. I usually had some diesels. And it started skipping real bad, and got it nailed down to number 6 cylinder. So my worker and I put the looks like a spark plug wire, but it's called a power pack or something. But we noticed it was wet and had rust marks on it, and couldn't figure out how water got there. So it ran for about 4 hours good, and then it went back to skipping. So I drove it like that for 4 weeks till I could find a mechanic that wanted to look at it. And come to find out, he said it was not they thought it was the intake manifold leaking, and he said it was not that. Didn't need a radiator, so we'd put that on there. But I said, well, how about the water getting on the cylinder? And he said, still don't know why it's doing that, but we put a little silicone around it, and maybe it will work. And come to find out, are you still with me there?
Yes. We're listening. We're taking all this in.
Okay. Now, this is one of those things that I drove the truck for 4 to 5 weeks, pulling trailers and loads. I'm going to do residential tree work in Augusta, Georgia, and working the truck on 7 cylinders. You know, it was terrible, but had to use it. But anyway, come to find out, as I picked the truck up and paid him for the radiator, I said, how in the world could water be getting up on top of the motor? And he says, rain. I said, no, it can't be. And then it dawned on me that ever since I bought the truck, when I pressed the windshield wiper, the right side, the passenger side, would wet the windshield as normal, but the driver's side, I never saw any water, ever. So at that point, he said, that's your problem. And that's been 3 weeks ago, and I have not even tried to identify why that water or how it's getting on top of the motor, but I assume a broken hose or squirting the wrong way. But I haven't worried about it. I'm just so glad to have one running on 8 cylinders.
That is
a problem.
I've been doing this for 25 years, and I know you've been doing this longer than me. I've never seen that before.
James, that is killing me. You could have called me on that one, and I could have used it for a great tech tip quiz.
Yeah. That would have been a good brain teaser.
I said that was like a tech tip quiz.
Yes.
It really was. And the funny thing is, it sometimes shows you that it's something so darn simple that it's you just don't see it.
Okay, everybody out there, really disregard what James said, because that's going to be a tech tip quiz. That whenever I use whenever I try to wash my windshield, my truck starts skipping. How's that? I love it.
Right.
Hey,
it really happened.
That is so awesome you shared that with us. Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, and you hear some great stuff like that.
Absolutely.
That is amazing. Okay, if you have a question about your car, your truck, your SUV, you give us a call. I will mention that I recently had a phone call from someone that live in Alabama. They call me from time to time on car questions. They like to work on their own car. And what they mentioned is their upper radiator hose had blown out. And they wanted to know what to do. They said it did run hot. I told them to go ahead and replace the radiator hose that they have and go ahead and put a new thermostat in there. Right. Of course, a new thermostat to me is a motor rad thermostat. Right. So they're the best. Mm-hmm. And then go ahead and put some antifreeze in there, but the main thing is go ahead and drive it first. And the reason I told them that, you want to make sure that the engine don't run hot and it didn't cause damage when it runs hot. And if it does good after about 100 miles or so, then go ahead and flush the coolant, replace any other radiator hose they have on that might be mushy or bad, and make sure everything's okay. He did that. He called me back about 2 or 3 days later and said everything's good. So if you have a problem, and you're doing some cooling system work and it did run hot, replace that thermostat with a motor rad thermostat. And we'll be right back after this. 800-224-9090. You can also watch us live on Facebook and YouTube. And we'll go over and talk to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, welcome to the C&C Auto Show. And what can we help you with?
Thank you. I thought I'd take a stab at your text tip.
Oh, you know what we got to do first? We got to move you to on stage. And the question was that Buck was a land surveyor. He was in a big truck, F-350. He was out in the woods. It had rained the day before. He got out of the truck. He slipped. He fell. He broke his leg. The truck was stuck. His leg was broken. His phone had no reception. Elizabeth, how did he let his friends know that he needed help?
Well, first I thought maybe he just pushed the SOS button on his truck that connects to that service. But then I thought, Aaron thinks a little bit outside the box. And maybe this man has a dog, and this dog's name is Lassie. And he let the dog loose and said, Lassie, go get help. And the dog knew where to go to get him help.
Wow. Now
That's
that
all
is
I got.
pretty good. Now that is outside the box. Oh, that is such a good one. But, oh, Elizabeth.
No dogs allowed.
That was good, though. I loved it. You added a story. See, you painted a picture for everybody out there, and I loved it.
Good.
Hey, thank you.
Good.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
All right, the number to call, 800-224-9090. If you got a question about your car, your truck, your SUV, you don't hesitate to give us a call, and we will go to the next caller. And welcome to the C&C Auto Show, and what can we help you with?
Hey, this is Billy. I'm going to try the tech tip quiz.
Oh, Billy, let me put you on stage. You know the deal. Buck's way out in the woods. He got out of his truck. He fell, broke his leg, and he was stuck. Phone didn't work. His friends were way down the road, about a mile or so out. But what did he do to let them know he needed help? All eyes were on you.
He actually flew the drone up, and they could see the drone, and then he crashed the drone, which let them know that something was wrong, because he never crashed a drone when he was surveying, and that brought him to him.
So he was really good at the drone. That drone may have had like a self-destruct button or something. Just blow itself up.
That's right.
Billy, you getting mighty warm. I mean, mighty warm. But it's just there's just no cigar flying around on the drone.
Maybe he flew it around in a circle like a buzzard.
Yeah, I hated to do that. Hey, Billy, thank you very much. All right. The number to call, 800-224-9090. If you have a question about your car, your truck, your SUV, I want to mention one thing about the AC systems again. We've been talking about ACs. One important part of an AC system is the door actuators.
Right.
And it used to be they were mostly vacuum controlled on most vehicles. Now they're electronically controlled. So sometimes people hear that dreaded click, 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 click in their dash. And sometimes it might not be that terrible.
Right.
Because some actuators you can get to okay. Other ones are very difficult to get to. Either one, I recommend the Dorman AC door or the Mo door actuators because they fit, they last a long time. And if someone's doing their own door lock actuators, some of them a person can change if they enjoy working with their vehicles. Then go out and get you a good Dorman actuator, put it on the vehicle, make it work. If it's one of those that the whole dash has to come off, you may decide to get someone to take care of that for you.
Yeah, those things are normally, it takes you an hour to fix or it takes you a week to fix. There's no in between.
Yeah. On some of those actuators, they set the actuator on the floor and then they built the car around it.
Right.
So, okay, ready to go to the next caller?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Let's go over to James in Aiken. James, welcome to the C&C Auto Show.
How you doing, James?
Hey, Taylor, Aaron, and of course Mason. Time's getting short. 3 quick things. Wrong answer for the tech tip I think I might have. I got a question. Talk about air conditioning real quick, and I need an update from Taylor. So what sequence do you want them in?
Just shoot.
Okay, first thing, Taylor, how's things going with the new educational facility for automotive training in Augusta that you mentioned on this show back in 2022?
We are in the final planning stages of the blueprints and everything else. We had to go back and change a few things because we have some emerging technologies in automotive, such as ADAS, that require a little bit different space than the one that we're used to. But we are moving forward, and we should be starting construction soon.
Good, great.
It's going to look good, too. I've walked through there. It looks really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's take a cruise past that tech tip quiz.
Okay. Buck was in the woods. He got stuck. He was in the F-350. He got stuck, and he got out of the truck to get unstuck. He broke his leg. His cell phone wouldn't work. No reception. How did he tell his friends that he needed some help?
Okay, I think he's going to blend it all together. I like the call before about the dog. That was smart.
That was
Anyway,
good. That
I
was
think
good.
Since he had a drone, and you haven't discounted the drone action out there, what if he entered a message into his cell phone, strapped that cell phone to the drone, and fired that rascal up in the air together, and that allowed the message to get off to his group that he was in trouble, and then he just brought his drone and his phone back home?
Let's run that past the judges and see what they say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You are absolutely right.
I would have never guessed that.
Buck was a surveyor, so he had a pretty nice drone. He knew how to fly it pretty well, too. He wrote a text, and at first it said could not send, unsendable or whatever, no reception, couldn't send it. So what he did, he fired up the drone, and then he punched in the text, because you only get a short period of time to send the text before it marks it as unsendable. So he immediately, right after he marked it, wrote the text and pushed send, he strapped it to the drone and flew it up about 200 feet up in the air. Then it sent the message, and then he brought it back down, and he could see that the message had sent. And so he waited for his coworkers to come help him, and that was some good thinking. And Jim, that was some good thinking on your part.
Absolutely.
Because you're a winner. You're a winner of the Tech Tip Quiz today. And what I got to ask, though, is, James, how in the world did you come up with the answer to that one?
It's like you guys, you stand on the shoulders of the people that go before you and maybe take a little step further. So the drone was out there, accepted as part of the answer, let's say. It wasn't discounted. And then I know that text messages require less bandwidth, a less robust connection to the cell service than does a voice call. And I know that they'll try to do it more than once for a period of time until they give up. So let's just send it in the air and see what happens. So I sent the answer up in the air just like the guy did with the drone.
You did great, and congratulations. And appreciate you answering today's Tech Tip Quiz. We're out of time. I want to say thank you to Taylor Bryant for being here.
Absolutely.
And also
Glad to be
I
here.
want to say thank you to Mason Rogers in there that makes all these digits fly together and makes everything work well. We appreciate that very much. Want to ask everyone to tune in next week for more of the C&C Auto Show.